So we have a question from Plundalind. In your videos, you mention a loose and a tight grip. Can you elaborate on when to use a loose and tight grip, and what type of shots would you use those on?
Okay, well, yeah, really leading on from that, where initially it begins in that instance, in my mind. So, if you've ever played snooker or American pool, the cue ball and the object ball is the same size. So, in traditional 8-ball pool, English 8-ball, whatever you want to call it, the cue ball is smaller. Now, some people might say, well, why is it smaller? Well, crazily enough, that when the coin-operated tables were introduced into the pubs, I don't know, maybe it was the 70s, might be before, I don't know exactly when it was. So how does the cue ball come back out when it goes down the pocket? Obviously, the object ball stay in the table because you've got to put the coin in to get the tables back out. Okay, pay for the game. So they decided to make it smaller. So we've been stuck with a small cue ball ever since, which makes the game really unique. Now, the argument of now there's a lot of tables that are obviously non-coin operated. Does that then mean that we should go to the cue ball the same size? It's been spoke about a lot. But you've got to appreciate you're going to change the whole complex of it. It's like playing a completely new game. It's not the same game anymore. Rightly or wrongly, do you want it? Don't you want it? Well, I've done a lot of exhibitions in New Zealand. And in New Zealand, they play with the cue ball the same size. And it's very, very enjoyable to play. I liked it. But I'm not saying I prefer one or the... It is what it is. But it's different, because you're hitting the cue ball different. So with the cue ball being the same size, if you want to effectively stop the ball, you've got to firm the grip and you've got to hit it with a lot more authority. If you hit the smaller cue ball with the same authority, because it's lighter and smaller, it's going to come back towards you. So how do you get the cue ball to stop with the smaller white is a lot of factors. Of course, the speed and the acceleration of the cue into the shot, the grip, all these different things. Now, I could drive you mad and go around in circles with the grip and everything else, but just try it for yourself. Just try the difference between when you use a firm grip compared to when you use a light, softer grip. It's a completely different hit. When do you not use it? Again, how long is a piece of string? What shot are you playing? What are you trying to execute? Where are you trying to get position? Where are you trying to get the cue ball? What are you trying to achieve with it? And this is when people talk to me about drills. Do you do drills, Mick? Not really. Because my understanding and my perception of the game is the better your cue ball control is, the better player that you're going to be. So I've more been one about mastering cue balls. Now you might say, well, is that not drills though? It does. Yeah, some drills enable you to learn or teach you to be better with the cue ball. But not all of them. So in my mind, I want to play a shot in a certain way. Where did the cue ball go? Did it go where I intended it to go? If it did, amazing. Probably never get beat. Well, that's not the case, because I do. If it didn't go where I wanted it to go, why? And that is really the key ingredient here. You've played a positional shot. You've thought it was going place A, and it's gone place B. But the real big thing now is why. You have to understand why. And you have to tweak your grip, and you have to tweak your stroke and little tweak where you hit on the cue ball to then get it where you actually thought it was going to go. And then once it goes there, it's then got to sink in of why it went there. And effectively, you could have some sort of training aid where you just pot in a basic ball, either at middle of the cue ball, top of the cue ball, left-hand spin, right-hand spin, firmer grip, softer grip, and work it out for yourself. Why is it going in different places? Why is the cue ball finishing in different areas from effectively playing the same potting angle and the same shot? You're doing something different, obviously. And that is the real key to it all. The coaching is great, but a coach is only to advise a way, to advise like helping you on your way. But primarily, it's got to sink in here for yourself, because you're the one that has to remember it. So in terms of what shot or what not shot is a loose grip or a firm grip, is really down to your own devices to understand, well, what happened when I did the two different things.
Okay, we have a question from James Sykes. And I guess the feel, around most pool players is that the game is, in terms of popularity, has increased over the last few years. Maybe that's down to the activity of Ultimate Pool. But what is your view of the state of the game at present? But also, what are your thoughts on Q Sports being in the Olympics?
Okay, so I'll start with what I understand the most, which is obviously 8-ball, reds and yellows, whatever you want to call it, traditional pool as we know it. What is the state of the game? I certainly think as far as popularity, as far as pool clubs opening, as far as pool clubs being busy, from all those point of view, I think it's probably as good as it's been probably since the 90s in terms of Q Sports. Not so much pool. Pool back in the 90s was more in pubs rather than pool clubs. It was more snooker clubs with a couple of pool tables. Now what you've got is actually pool clubs with a couple of snooker tables. I'm talking UK here. If you go to China, it's a different argument altogether. Australia, can't really get into that. But as far as the UK is concerned, so there's more pool clubs than ever. The table manufacturers are busier than what I've ever known them to be. Now, whether that be Sam Leisure, who I do a lot of work with, if you want to talk about the different other brands of tables out there, they're all doing exceptionally well. Ultimate Pool have obviously bought a brand of table in now, a new brand of table. So, in terms of all that, and in terms of, I'm having some cue repairs done at the moment on my Chinese 8-ball cue. I've had to wait a week. It's quick as I can do it. Come back in a week, and that's pretty much doing you a favour because I'm, trying to help you out a little bit. So all the cue manufacturers are doing really well. The cue sales, my sponsor Tiger Cues, as I've alluded to before, flat out busy, like never been busier. Then you look at the industry of the different chalks, the different tips, ferrules, brake cues, cases, little gadgets, little implements, all these cloth manufacturers. It's all going on. Far greater than what I can ever remember when I started playing really seriously about 1996. So as far as where the state of the game is, where that's concerned, exceptional, I would suggest. Where the state of the game was as far as standard, might upset one or two people here, but I think the standard was higher before. That's not to be rude, but when you got the likes of the Darren Appletons and Gareth Potts and people like that who aren't playing, not to mention some of the other fantastic great players from yesteryear, I don't think the standard is quite as high, in my view. Again, it's only my opinion, doesn't make me right. I'm sure somebody would have a different opinion. As far as the prize money is concerned, better. Had I hoped to have seen it even further on from in the last 4 years, if I'm being honest, yes. I had hoped that when I got back into the game, that the prize money was going to be greater than what it is now. And I had hoped that it would be more in your face as far as the television is concerned. I appreciate there's a lot of channels and it's competitive and there's so much more going on as far as what you can watch and from entertainment. I get that. But I had hoped that it would move on a little bit further with that. But yeah, it certainly moved on from the 90s, no question. It certainly moved on from the 2000s and 2000, but is it starting to kind of find its level again? This kind of 10,000 first prize that seems to be in everybody's mind as far as pool's concerned, and quite infatuated by it, in my opinion. I think the breakdown of some of the tournaments is really, well, mad, if I'm being honest. Can't really get on board with it because the first prize wants to be this carrot dangler. And in my view, the only way that you can ever get any sort of professional circuit going seriously is the top 16 and the top 32 need to be making something. So I liken it to say, let's say if you've got a snooker player, I'm going to use somebody who I know quite well, say Joe Perry. Good snooker player, played in some big matches, very credible in his own right, Joe. Sort of been there between that sort of 15 and 20 for a long, long time period of his career. And let's say he earns, I don't know what he earns, but I'm just going to put a figure out there of 120,000. And he plays 15 tournaments. As an example, again, I don't know. I'm just saying Joe because he's not an elite player, but he's a very good player that's been a very good professional for a very long time. So he plays, 15 tournaments, earns 120,000. So his average per tournament he goes to is £8,000. Great. Now, how I saw the ultimate pool, or any form of pool when I started playing, was let's say you play 15 tournaments, and if you rank number 16, you get 30k. Now, you might say, well, why do you say 30k? Well, it's minimum wage. That's the average wage of, not minimum wage, but it's the average wage in the UK, probably including London, but 30k. I don't think it'd be a million miles away from that. If you said it was 25k, well, whatever. So the person who's in the top 16 plays 15 tournaments and earns 30k. That's two grand a tournament. Well, now what you've got there is you've got some longevity, because you've at least got people that are earning some form of living, certainly what the average national wage would be. Again, I don't know the exact number, so don't jump all over me, but 25, 30k, whatever. Well, then you've got some sort of sustainability in terms of being a professional pool player. But when you've got a professional tour where the person who's ranked number 10 has probably only doubled up what they've paid in entry fees, we're not there, are we? And we're a long way from it. I don't know the implications. I don't know how much it costs to put tournaments on. I know it can't be easy to get sponsors in this day and age because there's so many things going on. So I go back to the original question. As far as the industry is concerned, it's exceptional. As far as from a player's point of view is concerned, how far are we really on in terms of somebody packing their job in? They're earning a bit more money than what they used to as a hobby, but still nowhere near enough to take it completely serious. And I'd probably only suggest from tournament winnings, I'd say that there's only probably Tom and one or two other people that you could credibly say are earning anything like what you'd need to become a full-time professional player just from tournament earnings. I know some of the other guys do exhibitions and everything else, and that also is off the back of the incredible work this Ultimate Pool has done. So, not knocking any of the organisations or associations at all. Certainly guys are making a few quid because it's out there, but I would have liked to have thought, or I would have liked to have hoped that it was a little bit further on than what it is at this stage.
And how about the Olympics?
Yeah, so the Olympics, it's going to be Chinese 8-ball, isn't it? Because they're the one that's got the money. They've put a bid in, a tender, for the 2032 Olympics, which is in Sydney. And now I understand it, I'm no expert on it, but to be a member of the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, or to have any, or not necessarily be a member, but to have any kind of chance, it has to be played all over the world. So what Chinese 8-ball are doing is they had an event in Chicago. They had the World Championship for the disability, which obviously ticks a lot of boxes in terms of what they're trying to achieve with the Olympics. They had an event in Africa. They've had an event in Australia, China, obviously, but all over Asia. They've had tournaments. I believe this year there'll be a tournament in South America. I don't know where it is as yet. And what that basically is, it is ticking the boxes that's necessary for it to be accepted in the Olympics. I believe so many nationalities have got to be involved, and I said there's a lot more implications than just we want to be in the Olympics. There's a lot going on behind the scenes. Obviously, I'm a joy-signed player, so I get to hear some things, not everything. It's not my business. But from what I understand, they were on a short list of 8 sports, games, however you want to call that, for want of a better word. So, and the plan is they are trying really, really, really hard to get it into the 232 Olympics. Will it happen? Well, that's another question entirely. I don't know. But if anybody can get it in the Olympics, and any game is going to be in the Olympics first, I've got to believe it's going to be Chinese 8-ball, because they have made it their kind of task to make it happen more than any other cue sport I've ever seen, and they've got the financial clout to back it up. So, you know what? It might just happen. I never thought it would, but it might just happen. Might not be 232, it might be 236, might be 2040, but I've got a funny feeling Chinese 8-ball might be in the Olympics at some point in my lifetime. I never thought it was going to happen.
I just want to follow up on something you mentioned in the last question around the standard and the standard of yesteryear versus current day. In your opinion, what are you measuring that standard on? Is there any insights you can point out?
Okay, so I think like everything really. I mean, things peak, and if you go back to the 90s, even the snooker, the late 90s, early 2000s. Now, I appreciate the standard in the lower rankings has improved, but would you suggest that the top players in the snooker now play to Stephen Hendry, Ronnie O'Sullivan, John Higgins, Mark Williams' peak? Have a little think about that. I've got my view on it, but just have a little think about it. Have a little think about the idea that Ronnie O'Sullivan, John Higgins and Mark Williams are 49. And as great as they are, really they should have been put away a long time ago. And Ronnie actually does allude to that. Take the tennis, for example. A 37-year-old Djokovic, a 37-year-old Federer before he retired, won a slam. Rafael Nadal, 2 sets down at the Australian Open at 36 years of age. And the tennis is obviously extremely physical. You know, to me, virtually everything has been impacted by other things that are now accessible. PlayStations, Xbox, Facebook, TikTok, I don't know, Netflix. Just there's so many different things that you can be doing now, as opposed to playing games or sports. Now, it doesn't apply to everything. Darts has gone the other way, because darts was very much a pro-am when Phil Taylor was in his prime, and it's now become professional because of all the money that's been thrown into it. So rather than guys having to go to work or owning a pub and practicing 2 or 3 hours a day, they can now practice 8 hours a day because it's a full-time job. So of course the standard's going to get better because the money's got better. But where pool's concerned, it's still very much hobby-based, where people are deemed to be a professional because they meet the criteria of what that particular tour states what a professional is. We're not professional players. You're just a professional because that tour says if you were in the top 32 or the top 64, we class you as a professional player. But they've all got jobs. So other than, myself, Darren, Gareth, Chris Melling, again, 1 or 2 others, Jason Shaw, who've come from the 8-ball game, they've got jobs. And I'm saying not all of them, 1 or 2. I know I'm always missing one. I get that, because I don't know everybody's personal business. I can only go off a generalisation. Now, so how do you really then get an influx of players or an influx of new generation? We've been waiting for players for years to come on the scene and knock the top dogs over. Well, when I played on the Ultimate Pool Tour at 42, I finished number 1 in the rankings. Chris Melling was number 2 in the rankings at 43. Gareth Potts was still floating around the top of the game, of course, because he's a great player. Ronan McCarthy, 55, 56 years of age, has won 2 World Championships in the last 3 years. And this isn't taking... Mark Farnsworth is probably, 46. Mark Boyle, 45, 46, certainly mid-40s. Phil Harrison has only just tailed off at 52, 53. So yeah, you can say, well, it's one of those games where you can play a little bit later on in your life. But really, no disrespect, but in my day, when the youngsters come along, they toppled over the big guns very, very quickly. Now, there was a change in rules. I get that. There was a big change in rules from the old rules to the world rules. But you could see such a gulf of how the player had took it on. And when I look at like golf and I think of how far Tiger Woods took it on from Greg Norman and Nick Faldo in the 90s, or how far Sampras took it on from like the McEnroes and Stefan Edberg and those guys. I mean, he was totally different league. Him and Andre Agassi were totally different class. And Hendry, how far he took it on from those guys in the 80s, just again, totally different level. What you get to see now is you get to see, unless it's really a predominant sport like football, football will always hold its own because of how many people play it and how big the sport is. Golf will always hold its own. Basketball will always hold its own because of how many people play it. So you will always produce greats from that. But if I looked at the pool now and I looked at the ultimate pool and you said to me, is there anybody on the ultimate pool that I think I could put in my top 10 of all time that wouldn't have already been there? I could probably only make a case for Tom. I could only make a case for him. Where there's not 3 or 4 of them, is there? There's not Gareth, Phil, Jason Twist, Gareth, myself, Mellin, all those guys. Again, I know I've missed some guys, but that era, all of us played in one team, in the England team, let alone all the other great players. The Rob McKennas, the Pat Holtz, the Wayne Fryers, the Chilton, there was loads of great players, loads and loads. And the top 32 was completely stacked of exceptional players with the creme de la creme of half a dozen. But in terms of now, and it's not being disrespectful or anything else, but if the old guard returned again tomorrow, we'd probably all be in the top 8 within the first season. And we really shouldn't be. One, because we're playing different cue sports, which are impacting your performances. Of course, different cues, different balls, different equipment. But where is your next player? Probably on Facebook, probably on Xbox, probably on PlayStation. I mean, I was born and raised in Dudley. Now, Dudley's not a particularly big place, certainly the town centre. You can walk from one end to the other in 10 minutes. There was 3 snooker clubs in the mid-90s. And on a weekend, you couldn't get a table. Unless you booked a table, you couldn't get a table. There's no snooker clubs in Dudley now. None. 0. There was 3. So snooker really peaked in the UK in the 90s. Really peaked, 80s, 90s. Started to mellow out in the 2000s. You go to a club in China, there's 100 snooker tables, there's 100 Chinese 8-ball tables, there's 100 Chinese 9-ball tables. Standards through the roof. You can't even imagine how good these people are. It's like going to Brazil and seeing somebody kicking a ball in the street and go, he looks as good as Ronaldo, he looks as good as Ronaldinho. Maybe not get the opportunity to come over and show it. There's thousands of footballers in Brazil who are awesome. I know because I've been there half a dozen times, I've seen it. So the standard has to impact when there's not enough numbers to generate that next talent. Now, there is a young lad round here I wanted to mention, won a really good tournament at the weekend, Jaden Billingham, who's 17, who obviously I take a lot of pride in. I know his dad really well. His dad fitted all the carpets and everything in my house. I've known Jaden since he's been about 9 or 10 years of age. And it's so refreshing to see somebody, especially from around here, take on the big players and looks like, he's still got work to do, but he looks like he could be the next big thing. And he looks like he could be the one to challenge. Because let's get it right, Tom was just getting it all his own way. So it's time for everybody else to step up and get to Tom's level. Work a bit harder or work on your game or whatever. But even the lads that are doing well on the Ultimate Pool now, they're coming up to 40 years of age. And they're still the same standard now as well. It's not like they're playing any better. Yeah, again, only an opinion. I don't want to be too kind of, what's the word when people talk about the yester generation, like it's always better. Nostalgic, if you like, whatever. But if you said to me, I've got to pick 6 players from 2002 to take on 6 players now, I'd be extremely confident in the 6 from 2002. Yeah, comment down below and see if you agree with me. If you disagree with me, please do. Keep it pleasant. I've got a heart. You don't have to rip me to pieces if you don't agree. But I'd be interested to see what your views on it are. So any 6 now to play against myself, Chris Melling, Gareth Potts, Phil Harrison, and Jason Twist. That's my 6. So, yeah, put your 6 together and we'll debate it in the next video. There you go.